Hey everybody, Father Warner here. We are in Wednesday of the 5th week of Easter. Technically, the 1st of May is also celebrated as the feast of Saint Joseph the Worker. But I'm going to continue teaching you the Acts of the Apostles, and if we followed the liturgical cycle, we would have been teaching a very important text which usually gets skipped out because of this feast, taken from Acts chapter 15 verse 1 to 6. Now, I want to make this request. Please read your text. Okay, please read your text. Now, after having read the text, and I suggest you pause, read the text, and then we carry on. Now, coming to my teaching today. You know, on the 29th of January in the year 1959, Pope John the 23rd, also called the Good Pope, made an announcement in St. Paul's Basilica. This is St. Paul's outside the walls of Rome. And he made the announcement saying that he was calling for an ecumenical council. This came to be known as the Second Vatican Council. It was the first council called in 100 years. Now, at this point of time, the church was a rather ancient church, good traditions, everything seems to be in place. There was no urgency in calling for the council. But John the 23rd realized that the winds of change needed to sweep into the corridors of the Vatican and all across the world, and so he calls for this council. Now, we get the impression today sometimes that the Second Vatican Council ended with everything tied up in neat little ribbons and bows. It didn't. There were several arguments, discussions, debates. People were unhappy. Some still continue to be unhappy about the Second Vatican Council. And such was the disagreement that there was a cardinal called Alfredo Tivani who said, I hope I die before this council gets over. And when he was asked by someone, why would you want to die before this council gets over? He said, at least I'll die Catholic, because he felt that, things were changing so rapidly that we would stop being Catholic. Now, very interestingly, this is a fear that exists even today. There are so many people who believe, the church is changing. There are the others who will say, the church is not changing at all. They will bemoan the pace at which change ought to have come. It hasn't come, and that there will be others who will resist it vociferously. So there are shrill voices today also in the church, and some of these shrill voices are unnecessarily amplified on the internet. They promote the idea that the church is about to go through a schism, a breakup, or is going to be in a catastrophic mess. I want to assure everybody, if you do not know, the church belongs to Jesus Christ, not to you and me. The Holy Spirit is in charge, and change will come. It will come to any institution at a slow pace, or it will come rather rapidly. There's always a process in the change of any institution of what we call thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. So there's always this proposition of something, a debate against it, and then we come to a middle point. Now, coming to the teaching of today, that's why I've given you this introduction. The teaching of today is taken from Acts chapter 15 verse 1 to 6, and it speaks about the first change that came to an infantile early church, and it happened somewhere between the year 48 and 50, which is recorded in Acts chapter 15. What's happened so far? We know that Paul and Barnabas have gone out onto the first missionary journey. We saw that in chapter 13 and 14. They have traveled to Cyprus, traveled to modern day Turkey. There was a lot of rejection of this of the good news as they went along, and each time they went first to the Jews. They entered a Jewish synagogue. Lystra was the only exception where there was no Jewish synagogue, and they preached in the streets. But they went always to the Jews, and the Jews rejected this message. So Paul will say, having come to the Jews, we now go to the Gentiles. And guess what? The Gentiles accepted the message of Jesus with open arms. And herein lies the problem, and that was the reason why this council was called. Now, I want to explain this to you. You know, the early church, at this point of time, we call it the early church, was distinctively Jewish. Yeah. Yes, we have learnt already from Acts of the Apostles that the early Christians in Antioch were called Christians. They were given this name Christians. But even though they were Christians, they weren't going to some Catholic mass or had a clear Christian character. They were still very, very Jewish in both cult and also culturally. They were, and in their customs. So Judaism was the vehicle which took the Jesus movement forward. They were very Jewish. Now, the hallmark of Judaism, as you know, was circumcision. This was the sign of the covenant, the Abrahamic sign of the covenant. This distinguished them as Jews. It was the sign of the covenant. But now that the early church is exploding with Gentiles and not with Jews, obviously the Gentiles and many among the community began to ask, well, why do we need this Jewish sign? We are followers of Jesus Christ. And clearly you can see that therefore there would be a division in the church. We are told in today's text, some who belonged to the Pharisaic party, that is to say, they were Christians, or rather they had now become followers of Jesus. They still maintained that Jewish character, but they came from a very strict Pharisaic background, and they began to say, well, why are these Gentiles not being circumcised? And the Gentiles' response is, well, we are not becoming Jews, we are becoming followers of Christ. And as a consequence, the first, what we call an ecumenical council of the church, took place in somewhere between the years 48 and 50 AD, a few years after the resurrection of Jesus himself. So change comes to every institution. We need to make sure that this change is always in tune with the heart and mind of Jesus Christ. I hope you enjoyed this teaching. Don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, subscribe to this channel, and do leave your comments. These videos are meant to enrich your faith and the faith of others. So unless you share it with others, we don't become evangelizers. You can also go to my blog, pottypadre.com. I have what I teach you in text form, so in case you need it for your own studies. Also, I'm on Instagram, so pottypadre, you can go to Instagram, and I have a shorter version of 1.5 minutes designed especially for young people. Bye for now.